Jake Turner sat in the corner booth of Murphy's Diner and stared at the worst day of his life through the grimy window. His girlfriend Lisa had broken up with him that morning over text message while he was eating cereal. She said he was going nowhere and had no ambition. Then his beat-up Honda had died in the parking lot of the auto shop where he worked. The engine made a sound like a dying whale before giving up completely. His boss Tony told him to fix it on his own time, since the shop was too busy with paying customers. Now, Jake sat in this depressing diner with $3 in his pocket and a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been made yesterday. The waitress was a tired woman named Carol, who looked like she had given up on life sometime in the 1990s. She had served him the coffee in the ugliest mug Jake had ever seen in his 28 years of existence. The mug was ceramic, but shaped all wrong. It had weird angles that made no sense and patterns carved into it that hurt his eyes when he looked directly at them. The patterns seemed to move and shift when he wasn't paying attention. The whole thing was painted in colors that shouldn't exist together, but somehow did. It was like someone had taken a normal coffee mug and decided to make it as offensive to human vision as possible. Jake picked up the mug and held it at arm's length. "What the hell is this thing?" he said loud enough for other customers to hear. An old man reading a newspaper at the counter looked over with mild interest. A woman with her teenage daughter glanced up from their pie. "I mean, seriously, look at this," Jake continued, and turned the mug around so everyone could see it. "This has got to be the most pathetic excuse for pottery in the entire galaxy. Who designed this monstrosity? And why did they hate coffee drinkers so much?" The teenage girl giggled, and her mother tried to shush her, but was clearly fighting back a smile herself. The old man folded his newspaper and turned around on his stool to get a better look. "It's like someone gave a blind person a pottery wheel and told them to make something while having a seizure," Jake went on. He was warming up now, and the attention felt good after the terrible day he'd had. "Look at these angles, they make no geometric sense whatsoever. And these patterns, what are they supposed to be? Alien hieroglyphs, instructions for summoning demons, a map to the lost city of Atlantis." Carol. The waitress came over with a pot of coffee to refill his cup. "That old thing has been here since before I started working," she said. "Boss says it came with the place when he bought it 15 years ago. Always figured it was some kind of art project gone wrong." "Art project," Jake laughed and held the mug higher. "This isn't art, this is a crime against humanity. Whoever made this abomination probably died of shame once they realized what they had created. I bet their ghost still haunts pottery studios warning other artists not to make the same mistake." The other customers were laughing now, and Jake felt like he was on a roll. "You know what this looks like? It looks like what would happen if a coffee mug and a Rubik's Cube had a baby, and that baby was raised by wolves who had no understanding of basic design principles." He stood up and walked around the diner, showing off the mug like he was giving a presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the ugliest drinking vessel ever created by human hands. This thing is so hideous that aliens from other planets would take one look at it and decide that Earth isn't worth visiting because clearly we have no taste whatsoever." The old man was chuckling and shaking his head. "Son, you should do stand-up comedy," he said. "I'm serious, though," Jake continued. "This mug is like a test to see how much ugly a person can handle before their brain shuts down in self-defense. I bet if you stared at it too long, you'd start speaking in tongues or suddenly develop the urge to sacrifice a goat to whatever dark gods inspired this design." He sat back down, but kept the mug raised like he was making a toast. "Here's to whoever created this nightmare fuel. May they rest in peace, knowing that their life's work brought joy to people through sheer comedic value, because it sure as hell isn't bringing joy through its intended function as a coffee container." The teenage girl was laughing so hard she was snorting, and her mother had given up trying to maintain proper diner etiquette. Even Carol was grinning as she wiped down nearby tables. "You know what the worst part is," Jake said as his finale. "Somewhere out there in the universe, there might be an entire civilization that thinks this is what peak artistic achievement looks like. They probably have museums full of these things. And they sit around discussing the deep meaning behind each wobbly line and impossible angle. They probably think humans are primitive because we haven't learned to appreciate true beauty when we see it." He took a long sip from the offensive mug and made an exaggerated face of disgust. "Even the coffee tastes worse coming out of this thing. It's like the ugliness is contagious, and it's spreading to everything that touches it." What Jake didn't know was that Murphy's Diner sat on top of a dimensional weak point where the barriers between worlds were thin. His passionate mockery of the mug was resonating across space and time, reaching ears that were never meant to hear it. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, an alien warrior named Zara was listening to every word and interpreting them in ways that Jake could never have imagined. In the Kethver culture, passionate criticism of sacred objects was considered the highest form of courtship ritual. The more creative and detailed the insults, the more serious the romantic interest. Zara was already preparing her ships for the journey to Earth to claim this bold human male who had shown such impressive dedication to the ancient art of ceremonial mockery. 3 days had passed since Jake's coffee mug comedy show at Murphy's Diner, and he was trying to forget about his problems by focusing on work. He lay under the hood of a rusted pickup truck, trying to figure out why the engine kept making grinding noises when the owner pressed the gas pedal. The truck belonged to old Pete, who lived on the edge of town and used it to haul junk to the scrapyard twice a week. Jake had his head buried deep in the engine compartment when the sky above Denver started making sounds that didn't belong in nature. It began as a low humming that made his teeth ache, then grew into a roar that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The ground beneath his feet started vibrating and tools fell off their hooks on the garage walls. He pulled his head out from under the hood, then looked up through the open garage door. The blue Colorado sky was being torn apart like someone was ripping paper. A jagged line of pure darkness appeared overhead and began widening until it was big enough for a building to fit through. What came through the tier in reality was not a building, but something far more impossible. A massive ship that looked like it had been carved from black stone descended through the opening. It was easily the size of 3 city blocks and covered in spikes and weapon ports that glowed with purple energy. Strange symbols were carved into its hull, and they pulsed with light in patterns that made Jake's eyes water. The ship settled onto the empty lot across from Tony's auto repair with surprising gentleness for something so enormous. The dimensional tier in the sky sealed itself with a sound like thunder played backwards, and the normal afternoon sky returned as if nothing had happened. Jake stood frozen in place with a wrench in his hand and oil stains on his work shirt, wondering if he was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe the stress of Lisa leaving him and his car dying had finally pushed his brain over the edge. Maybe he was actually lying in a hospital bed somewhere, hallucinating about alien spaceships. His theory about having a mental breakdown was disproven when a section of the ship's hull slid open with a hiss of escaping air. A ramp extended down to the ground and figures began walking down it. The first figure was clearly not human, and definitely not a hallucination, unless Jake's imagination was far more creative than he had ever given it credit for. She was 8 feet tall and built like someone had crossed a professional wrestler with a suit of medieval armor. Her skin was dark gray with a metallic sheen, and she had 4 arms that ended in hands with claws instead of fingernails. Her face was humanoid, but angular with high cheekbones and eyes that glowed amber like heated metal. She wore what looked like battle armor made from the same black material. As her ship. Behind her came 7 smaller figures of various shapes and sizes. One looked like a 10-year-old child made of living crystal who chimed like wind bells when it moved. Two others appeared to be teenage twins with metallic silver skin and hair that sparked with electricity. Another was a serious-looking young man with tentacles where his arm should be. The remaining three were harder to identify from a distance, but all of them moved like trained fighters. The tall alien woman marched across the empty lot with purpose and confidence. She walked up to Jake like she had been looking for him specifically and stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she was even more impressive and terrifying. Her armor was covered in scratches and scorch marks that told stories of battles Jake couldn't imagine. "You are the one called Jake Turner," she said in a voice that sounded like gravel mixed with honey. Her accent was strange, but her English was perfect. "You are the human male who spoke the words of claiming over the chalice of eternal bonds." Jake opened his mouth to ask what she was talking about, but no sound came out. His brain was still trying to process the fact that he was having a conversation with an 8-foot-tall alien warrior, who apparently knew his name. The alien reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out something that made Jake's knees go weak. It was the ugly coffee mug from Murphy's Diner. The same impossible angles and eye-hurting patterns were exactly as he remembered them, but now the thing seemed to glow with its own internal light. "I am Zara of the Kethvar warrior clan," she continued, "former supreme commander of the Imperial fleet and mother to 7 adopted children of various conquered species. I have traveled across the galaxy to answer your challenge and claim you as my mate." "My what now?" Jake finally managed to say. "Your passionate words of mockery were heard across the dimensional barriers," Zara explained. "In my culture, such creative and detailed insults directed at sacred objects are considered the highest form of courtship display. You have proven yourself worthy of bonding with a warrior of my status." She held out the mug toward him. "This is the chalice of eternal bonds, sacred to my people for 10,000 years. By speaking words of challenge against it, you have declared your intention to mate with whoever holds it in trust. I accept your proposal." Jake looked at the mug, then at Zara, then at the 7 alien children who are now standing behind her in formation, like they were waiting for orders. The crystalline child was making musical sounds that might have been laughter. The twins were examining his garage with professional interest. The tentacled young man was studying Jake like he was, trying to determine if he posed a threat. "There's been a mistake," Jake said slowly. "I wasn't trying to propose to anyone. I was just making fun of an ugly coffee mug because I was having a bad day." "Modesty is attractive in a potential mate," Zara replied, "but there is no need to downplay your achievement. Your ceremonial mockery was artistically complex and showed deep understanding of aesthetic criticism. Few warriors could craft insults of such creativity and passion." She stepped closer, and Jake caught a scent like cinnamon mixed with ozone. "The bonding ceremony will begin immediately. My children are eager to meet their new stepfather." "Stepfather," Jake repeated weakly. "Yes," Zara said with what might have been a smile. 7 young warriors who need guidance and stability. You will help me raise them while we build our new life together on this primitive but charming planet." The tentacled young man stepped forward and spoke in a voice that was surprisingly mature. "I am Vex's eldest of the adopted brood. Are you capable of providing adequate tactical support and emotional guidance?" Jake looked around, desperately hoping to see Tony or anyone else who might help him explain that this was all a misunderstanding. The garage was empty, except for Pete's pickup truck and the growing number of aliens who seemed to think he was their new family member. In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching, as someone had apparently called the police about the alien spaceship. This was going to be a very long day. Jake woke up in his own bed, wondering if the previous day had been the most vivid stress nightmare in human history. Then he heard the sound of plasma weapons being fired in his backyard and remembered that his life had become completely insane. He looked out his bedroom window and saw the teenage twins, Rex and Nova, practicing combat maneuvers against holographic opponents that flickered in and out of existence. His neighbor, Betty Rodriguez, was standing at her fence line with a cup of coffee, watching the alien children train like it was the most normal thing in the world. Betty was a retired school teacher who had raised 5 kids of her own and didn't seem fazed by much of anything anymore. She waved at Jake when she saw him at the window. "Your new family is very energetic," she called out. "The little crystal one has been trying to photosynthesize on your roof since dawn." Jake pulled on yesterday's clothes and stumbled downstairs to find Zara standing in his kitchen, attempting to operate his ancient coffee maker. She had changed out of her battle armor into what looked like casual wear for an 8-foot-tall alien warrior. Her civilian clothes were still made of some kind of advanced material that seemed to shift colors in the light. "Good morning, my chosen mate," she said without looking up from the coffee maker. "I am attempting to understand your primitive beverage preparation rituals. This device appears to be malfunctioning as it produces only bitter brown liquid instead of the nutritious combat stimulants I require." "It's just coffee," Jake said. "You put water in the back and coffee grounds in the filter, and it makes coffee." "Coffee." Zara repeated the word like she was testing it. "Is this the liquid you were consuming when you performed the sacred mockery of the chalice?" "Yeah, that's coffee," Jake confirmed. "Look, we really need to talk about this whole marriage thing, because I think there's been a huge misunderstanding." Before Zara could respond, there was a crash from the living room, followed by the sound of apologetic chiming. They rushed in to find that Pip the crystalline child had somehow gotten stuck halfway through the coffee table. The little alien's crystal body was wedged in the wooden surface, and they were making distressed musical notes. Pip was attempting to demonstrate molecular phase shifting, explained Vex, who was sitting in Jake's recliner, reading what appeared to be a technical manual written in glowing symbols. The calculation for earthwood density was incorrect. Jake knelt down next to the trapped child and gently worked them free from the table. Pip felt warm to the touch, and their crystalline skin refracted light into rainbow patterns. Once free, they chimed what sounded like thank you, and immediately began examining the damage they had caused to the furniture. "It's okay," Jake said. "Accidents happen." The table was old anyway. Pip looked up at him with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected his face dozens of times and made a series of soft, bell-like sounds. Vex translated. "Pip says you are kind for a primitive species and asks if you have suitable surfaces for light absorption rituals." "You mean like sunbathing?" Jake asked. "More complex than simple thermal regulation," Vex explained. "Pip's species requires direct stellar radiation for metabolic processes. Your roof provides adequate exposure, but the angle is suboptimal." Jake looked at the hole in his coffee table, then at Pip's hopeful crystalline face, then at Zara, who was watching this interaction with what might have been approval. "We can probably build something better in the backyard," he heard himself saying. The sound of his doorbell interrupted the moment. Jake went to answer it and found 2 police officers standing on his porch looking very uncomfortable. Behind them, he could see news vans and curious neighbors gathering at the end of his street. "Mr. Turner," said the older officer whose name tag read Henderson, "we received reports about some kind of disturbance at your residence. Mind if we come in and take a look around?" Jake glanced back at his living room where a tentacled alien teenager was reading advanced technical manuals while a crystal child chimed apologetically at a broken coffee table. "This might not be the best time," he said. "Sir, we have reports of explosions and strange lights," said the younger officer Martinez. "Plus, there's a spaceship the size of a shopping mall parked across from Tony's garage. We need to make sure everyone is safe." Zara appeared behind Jake, moving with the fluid grace of a trained predator. Both officers immediately reached for their weapons, but stopped when they saw that her 4 hands were empty and held in a peaceful gesture. "Greetings, local law enforcement personnel," she said in her gravel and honey voice. "I am Zara Kethver, bonded mate of Jake Turner. We are conducting no activities that threaten your community." Officer Henderson stared up at her for a long moment. "Ma'am, you're 8 feet tall and have 4 arms. Accurate observation," Zara replied. "Your species shows promising attention to detail." "Are you from outer space?" Martinez asked. "I am from a planet in what you would call the Andromeda Galaxy," Zara said. "I have come to claim my mate and establish a household for raising my adopted children." Both officers looked at Jake, who shrugged helplessly. "It's complicated," he said. Before anyone could ask more questions, Rex and Nova came running around the side of the house, chasing what appeared to be a floating metal sphere that was shooting harmless but flashy energy beams. The twins were laughing and firing their own weapons at the training drone, while it performed evasive maneuvers above the front yard. "Defensive practice," Zara explained as the officers ducked instinctively. "My children require daily combat conditioning to maintain readiness." Officer Henderson slowly straightened up and looked at Jake with something like pity. "Son, I think you're in over your head. Tell me about it." Jake muttered. The rest of the morning was spent trying to explain to local authorities that the alien family was not an invasion force and had no hostile intentions toward Earth. Zara produced documents from something called the Galactic Council that apparently granted her refugee status, though. Jake noticed the papers were written in symbols that hurt to look at directly. By noon, Jake found himself sitting on his back porch, watching his new alien stepchildren attempt to understand human lawn care, while Betty Rodriguez offered helpful advice from her side of the fence. Pip had found a sunny spot near the garden and was absorbing light like a living solar panel. The twins were trying to mow the grass with military precision, while Vex calculated the optimal cutting height for maximum aesthetic appeal. "You know," Betty called over to Jake, "I raised 5 kids, and they were all human. These ones seem more polite than most teenagers I've met." Jake watched as Nova accidentally cut his neighbor's prize roses with an energy blade, then immediately began apologizing in broken English while Rex tried to repair the damage with some kind of healing device. "They're not exactly typical kids," Jake said. "No such thing as typical when it comes to children," Betty replied. "They need structure and patience, and someone who cares about them. Species doesn't matter much beyond that." Zara sat down beside Jake on the porch steps. "Your neighbor female shows wisdom," she said. "Raising young warriors requires dedication, regardless of their genetic origin." "About that," Jake said, "we really need to discuss this whole bonding thing, because I never actually agreed to marry you or become anyone's stepfather." "The sacred mockery was performed," Zara said firmly. "The challenge was issued and accepted. In my culture, such bonds cannot be dissolved except through combat or mutual agreement after a trial period of 1 solar cycle, 1 year," Jake said weakly, "during which time you will learn our ways, and we will learn yours," Zara continued. "If at the end of this period you wish to dissolve the bond, we will honor that choice." Jake looked at the organized chaos of his backyard, where 7 alien children were trying to make sense of suburban life while maintaining their warrior training. "And if I say no right now, then you bring dishonor upon both our houses, and my children lose the stability they desperately need," Zara said quietly. "They have all lost their birth families toward Jake Turner. I am all they have, and now you are part of that equation, whether you intended it or not." 2 months had passed since Jake Turner became the most unlikely stepfather in the galaxy, and he was starting to think he might actually be getting the hang of it. He had built Pip a proper greenhouse in the backyard, where the young crystal being could photosynthesize in peace. Rex and Nova had learned to channel their competitive energy into human sports, and were now the star players on the local community center basketball team despite being technically aliens. Vex had become fascinated with Earth engineering and spent most evenings helping Jake repair cars at the garage. The younger children were adapting well, too. Kira was a shy girl with butterfly wings who spoke in whispers and had a talent for healing minor injuries. Thog looked like a small bear, made of living stone, who communicated through rumbling sounds that showed surprising gentleness with Earth animals. Zada was the youngest, at what appeared to be 6 years old, with blue skin and tentacle hair, who could phase through solid objects when excited or scared. Jake had learned their individual stories and backgrounds. Each child came from a world that had been conquered or destroyed. Zara had found them as orphans and refugees and given them purpose as part of her warrior family. They were all dealing with trauma in their own ways, but they had each other, and now they had Jake, who was trying his best to be the stable father figure they needed. The morning everything changed started normally enough. Jake was making breakfast, while Zara practiced combat forms in the backyard. The children were getting ready for their various Earth activities. Pip was heading to the community college where they audited botany classes. The twins had basketball practice. Vex was helping at the garage. The younger ones were attending a special school program that Betty had arranged with the local elementary school. Jake was flipping pancakes when he heard the sound of aircraft approaching. He looked out the window and saw 3 military helicopters circling his neighborhood. They weren't the local police helicopters he had gotten used to seeing. These were serious military aircraft with weapons and official markings. "Zara," he called out, "we might have a problem." She came inside, still carrying her practice sword, and looked out the window with the experienced eye of a former military commander. "Enforcement vessels," she said grimly. "Someone has decided we are a threat." The helicopters landed in the empty lot where Zara's ship was parked. Soldiers in advanced combat gear emerged and began setting up a perimeter. Jake could see more vehicles arriving on the street and news crews being pushed back by military personnel. A man in an officer's uniform approached the house under a flag of truce. He was tall and lean with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in command positions. When he got close enough, Jake could see that despite his human appearance, there was something different about his eyes. They had the same knowing look that Zara's children got when they talked about their home worlds. "I am Admiral Kane Sullivan of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division," he said when Jake opened the door. "I need to speak with Zara Kethfer immediately regarding her unauthorized presence on this protected world." Zara appeared beside Jake, moving with predatory grace. "Admiral Sullivan," she said with recognition in her voice. "I should have expected the Council would send you." "You know him?" Jake asked. Kane Sullivan was one of the first humans to leave Earth and join the galactic community, Zara explained. That was before the non-interference protocol was established. He has spent 40 years climbing the ranks of Council enforcement. Sullivan nodded grimly. "I joined the Stars when I was 18 years old, served on 12 different worlds, and worked my way up to Admiral. Now I have the unpleasant duty of cleaning up the mess you've made here." "What mess?" Jake demanded. "They're not hurting anyone. The kids are going to school and playing sports and contributing to the community. The protocol exists for good reasons, Mr. Turner," Sullivan said. "Contact between advanced civilizations and developing worlds has to be carefully controlled. Unauthorized immigration by warrior castes creates diplomatic incidents that can escalate into interstellar conflicts. We seek only refuge," Zara said. "My family poses no threat to Earth or the galactic community. Your former Supreme Commander of the Kethfar Imperial Fleet," Sullivan replied. "Your presence here has been detected by your enemies. Long-range sensors show 3 war fleets converging on this system. They're coming for you, Zara, and they don't care about Earth's protected status. Jake felt his blood turn to ice water. War. Fleets. Your former second-in-command war chief. Thane has declared you a traitor and put a bounty on your head, Sullivan continued. He's also declared your adopted children to be spoils of war. He'll kill you and take them as trophies to prove his dominance. Zara's 4 hands clenched into fists, and her eyes blazed with amber fire. Thane is a coward who supported genocide when I refused. He seeks to eliminate me before I can expose his war crimes to the Council. That may be true, but it doesn't change the tactical situation, Sullivan said. I'm authorized to offer you safe passage off-world if you leave immediately. The Council will provide protection for you and your family on a secure colony world. And if we refuse, Zara asked, then Earth becomes a battlefield and millions of innocent humans die in the crossfire, Sullivan said bluntly. These aren't patrol ships, Zara. Thane is bringing enough firepower to crack this planet's crust. Jake looked at the children who had gathered in the living room, listening to every word. Pip was chiming with distress, while the twins stood protectively near their younger siblings. Vex had moved to the window and was analyzing the military positions with tactical expertise beyond his apparent age. How long do we have? Jake asked. 72. Hours before the first ships arrive, Sullivan said. After that, it becomes a shooting war, and Earth's defense grid won't be enough to stop them. Zara looked at Jake with something like apology in her alien features. I have brought danger to your world, my chosen mate. Perhaps it would be best if we departed before innocent people are harmed. No, Jake said firmly. This is our home now. These kids have finally found stability and happiness. I'm not letting some alien warlord tear that away from them. Jake, you don't understand the scale of what's coming, Sullivan warned. Thane commands hundreds of ships and thousands of warriors. This isn't some backyard dispute. This is interstellar warfare. Then we fight, Jake said. Humans have been fighting against impossible odds since we lived in caves. We're not about to stop now. Sullivan stared at him for a long moment. You're talking about going up against a fleet that could destroy continents. I'm talking about protecting my family, Jake replied. Earth is their home now, and that makes defending it non-negotiable. Zara placed one of her 4 hands on Jake's shoulder. You would risk your entire species for 7 alien children. They're not alien children, Jake said. They're my children. And this is what humans do when someone threatens our family. We fight back. Sullivan shook his head slowly. The Council has been observing your situation as an unofficial test of human-alien integration. I have to admit we didn't expect this level of loyalty from your species. Then you don't know humans very well, Jake said. We're stubborn that way. In the distance, more aircraft were arriving, and Jake could see that some of them weren't military. Ships with designs he didn't recognize were landing in fields outside town. The alien community had gotten word that one of their own was in trouble, and they were coming to help. It looks like we're not fighting alone. Jake observed Sullivan followed his gaze, and his expression changed from resignation to something like hope. The galactic community has never seen anything like this, he said quietly. A primitive world, standing up to defend refugees. We're not as primitive as everyone thinks, Jake said. We just care about different things. Jake's neighbor from 3 houses down was driving a modified lawn mower that could phase through ship hulls and appeared directly inside Thane's flagship. The confused alien warriors found themselves under attack by an elderly retired accountant named Harold, who had spent 40 years doing taxes and was thoroughly fed up with people who threatened his neighborhood. The battle that followed would be remembered in galactic history as the day Earth proved that advanced technology was no match for human creativity and sheer bloody-mindedness. Pizza delivery drivers performed impossible maneuvers through asteroid fields that would have challenged professional pilots. Construction workers used excavators to literally dig through enemy ship hulls. A group of soccer moms in minivans somehow managed to disable 3 cruisers by targeting their waste disposal systems. Jake found himself in the pilot's seat of Tony's tow truck, which had been equipped with a tractor, beam powerful enough to drag battleships out of formation. Beside him sat Pip, who was using their crystalline abilities to interface directly with the ship's computer systems. In the back seat, Rex and Nova provided tactical support while making running commentary about human driving habits. Hard, right? Jake, Nova shouted as plasma fire streaked past their windshield. There's a gap between those 2 destroyers. I see it. Jake replied and yanked the steering wheel with enough force to make the modified truck spin sideways through space. Pip, can you jam their communications? Pip chimed in affirmative, and suddenly, half of Thane's fleet found themselves unable to coordinate their attacks. The crystalline child had discovered that alien military communications used frequencies that were painful to their species, and they were taking a certain amount of satisfaction in disrupting them. Meanwhile, Zara was leading a strike force of allied ships against Thane's command vessel. Her 4 arms allowed her to operate weapons and navigation systems simultaneously, while she barked orders in 3 different alien languages. Despite being outnumbered, she was slowly fighting her way through the enemy formation toward a final confrontation with her former second-in-command. The tide of battle began to turn when Earth's secret weapons came online. Military satellites that had been disguised as communication equipment revealed themselves to be particle beam platforms. Underground missile silos opened to launch interceptor rockets with alien guidance systems. The planet's magnetic field was weaponized to create an electromagnetic pulse that disabled half of Thane's fleet. This is impossible, Thane screamed over the communication channel as his supposedly superior force found itself being systematically dismantled by garbage trucks and school buses. You are a primitive species with no understanding of advanced warfare. We understand warfare just fine, Jake replied as he used the tow truck's beam to drag a crippled enemy fighter into collision with its mothership. We've been practicing on each other for thousands of years. The only thing that's changed is the scale. Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the radio with barely contained amazement. I've been monitoring Galactic Council communications. 3 more systems have declared their intention to stand with Earth. The entire galaxy is watching this battle, and they're taking notes. The final phase of the fight came when Zara's ship docked with Thane's flagship for a boarding action. Jake wanted to follow her, but Vex convinced him that his job was to coordinate the continuing space battle while Zara settled things with her former lieutenant personally. The confrontation between Zara and Thane took place in the flagship's command center while human and alien fighters continued their chaotic dance around them. Through the ship's internal cameras, Jake watched his wife face down the alien warlord who had threatened their family. You have brought dishonor to the Kethver people, Zara declared as she drew her ceremonial blade. Your support of genocide and your pursuit of innocent children makes you unworthy of the warrior's code. The strong take what they want, Thane replied, raising his own weapon. I will claim your offspring as trophies, and this human pet of yours will learn what it means to challenge his betters. The duel that followed was brief and decisive. Thane was physically stronger, but Zara fought with the fury of a mother protecting her children and the skill of someone who had commanded fleets across the galaxy. When it was over, the war chief lay defeated, and his remaining forces surrendered rather than face the combined wrath of Earth and its new alien allies. As the smoke cleared and the surviving enemy ships retreated, Jake found himself back on solid ground, surrounded by his family and neighbors. Pip was glowing with contentment from all the solar energy they had absorbed during the battle. The twins were excitedly comparing notes with human pilots about combat maneuvers. Vex was already drawing up plans for permanent defensive installations. Admiral Sullivan approached with what might have been the first genuine smile Jake had seen from him. The Galactic Council has been in emergency session for the past 6 hours. They've unanimously voted to grant Earth provisional membership and offer your family permanent asylum. What does that mean exactly? Jake asked. It means Earth is now officially part of the galactic community, Solomon explained. It also means that what you've accomplished here is going to change how the galaxy thinks about primitive worlds and refugee integration. Betty. Rodriguez walked up carrying a casserole dish and looking remarkably calm for someone who had just helped coordinate an interstellar battle. I made extra food in case anyone wants to come over for dinner. Harold says his lawnmower needs some work after that business with the enemy flagship. Jake looked around at the bizarre family he had somehow acquired through a chance encounter with an ugly coffee mug. Zara stood with her forearms around as many children as she could reach. The younger ones were chattering excitedly about the battle, while the older ones were already planning improvements for next time. You know what? Jake said. I think we're going to need a bigger house, the sacred chalice that had started everything sat on. Jake's mantle, no longer a symbol of mockery, but a reminder that the most important connections in life often come from the most unexpected places. Jake Turner had gone from being a bitter mechanic with no prospects to becoming the stepfather of the most famous family in the galaxy. As the sun set over, Denver Jake realized that sometimes the best way to find your place in the universe was to stop looking for it and start making room for others to find theirs. Family wasn't about DNA or species or even planets of origin. It was about choosing to stand together when the universe tried to tear you apart and discovering that love could bridge any gap, no matter how impossible it seemed. The ugly coffee mug had brought them together, but it was their decision to stay together that made them a family.